I think one of the best talents you can have if you want to be successful in any business is empathy. And I will absolutely call empathy a talent. I think the fastest way to change your life is to change how you see the world. And you want to get information out of people, or you're in the business of leadership. The more sensitive the information that you need, the less questions you should be asking. The problem is with 90% of the people that I coach, especially high impact leaders, this is the biggest problem. They view the world through hierarchy and status. I think the talents were something I developed as a result of learning some of these things. And I think one of the best talents you can have if you want to be successful in any business is empathy. And I will absolutely call empathy a talent. That is not God-given. That is something I think that anybody can cultivate. And I think the better you get at understanding people, if you're not a sociopath, it's going to make you develop some kind of empathy. And I think that's one of the top things that you can have. And the second is just being obsessed with seeing behind the mask and understanding that if you modify your worldview to understand that there's a whole nother world out there that people can't see behind the mask that people wear, and seeing that without any kind of judgment, that is the true essence of what I would describe as like the key talents here. I think the fastest way to change your life is to change how you see the world. So there's a two-stage process for this. So stage one, we have this thing called an animal behavior profiling chart that I developed for kids who were maybe on the spectrum and needed to understand why people did what they did. So I go through all these things, and we finally get down to fear. They're scared. So we see, like I'm showing them posturing behavior that some people do, where they're trying to be on top, and I'm aggressive, loud. That's a fear behavior. That's not like confidence or anything like that. So I start showing them a behavior that used to piss them off, and then saying, here's what's under that. Like, here's the reason behind that. And the second element of this is in your everyday life. If you can start spotting these behaviors, you're not just seeing an adult who's scared, you're seeing a little script that got written when they were 8 or 9 years old that said, I will never let anybody hurt me again. And I think that gets addictive, because if you get someone's worldview to start seeing people as reasons instead of just like broken, oh, he's a, they'll call him a bad name, but the reason behind that, and they'll see that little childhood script, I definitely think that changes the world for people. And here's all the things, like if it gets really real, here's all the things that I'm kind of hiding. Because our number one fear as human beings, and I train a lot of people that do this venture capital stuff, where they get pitched all the time by people, private equity, that's what they call it. And I train them to spot like the BS in these guys that are pitching them. And there's so much. The first thing I train them to do is like when someone is in performance mode versus conveying information and being in a conversation. And rarely we can get to the point where we're actually realize that like other people are carrying way more than you think. And it's however similar you think you are to somebody else, it's 10 times minimum. And if somebody's listening right now and you want to get information out of people, or you're in the business of leadership, the more sensitive the information that you need, the less questions you should be asking. So you need to get really good at what's called elicitation. When someone says something, if we respond with a question, like what's called a provocative statement is, I bet that's challenging. Or I can imagine that you enjoy that. Or I can imagine there's a tremendous amount of job satisfaction right there. Or we use like a summary. Someone says something and we say, so you guys have been doing this for a long time and everybody here is kind of an expert in their field. They're going to keep going, and every once in a while, just a little bit of disbelief. They say some kind of big, cool thing that happened, and you're like, no way. There's no way that happened that fast. And then you get more information and more information. So, getting good at responding to statements with statements that are provocative. Not provocative as in they stir the pot, just provocative as in like they evoke a response out of the person. And that's not the entirety of the techniques, but that's one of them that's very powerful. And when we give up sensitive information, when it wasn't in response to a question, we feel as if we volunteered it. And we automatically start viewing that person in a different category than everybody else. So even if you and I are in the back of an Uber and I say, yeah, I heard Uber's like super high on job satisfaction, the Uber driver is going to turn and be like, what? And then he's going to start talking in a way that he doesn't talk to other Uber drivers with. I'm automatically in the unconscious part of his brain in the like a friend area. This is like friends and family. So I get way different behavior because sensitive information's coming out without an interrogation. And I would say the number one problem that people face when I coach them is we have a tendency in our brain that when we need information from another human being, I need questions. I have to ask questions to get it out. And that's the hardest to resist, is just that, can I stop myself from asking questions and just use some statements like, that sounds fascinating. I bet there's a lot involved with that. And just using those statements. So if it's someone that I know, I may start with a few things that are true, and I want their unconscious part of their brain to kind of say, yes, I agree, I agree, I agree. So I might start our conversation with, Ken, you've been working here for 18 months. You've really hit the ground running. I know everybody on your team likes you. So I'm saying things that you're going to agree with. So let's pick up right there. I know everybody on your team likes you, but I would imagine that there are some challenging things going on where you're working right now. So instead of me asking, I'm just saying, I would imagine this is happening. Or I might even start softer and I say, but I imagine it's not the easiest job in the world. And they'll say, oh, yeah, well, I mean, there's some drawbacks. And then right when they respond, it might be a small response. I was like, drawbacks are always part of business, but sometimes they can be bigger than others. And then I'll get another response and I'll say, if it's something big, I might say, what? There's no way. I've never heard of that happening here. I would never imagine Lisa would do anything like that. And then you say, oh yeah, it's even worse than you thought. And I'll get more information from that. So I think that is like the baseline. Let's start with this baseline of being in composure. Because like composure is got to be the first thing that you learn. Because there's two opposite ends of composure. We have collapse and we have posturing. And the composure stays there. And as a leader, when you have composure and then you use some of these provocative statements, it is a wildly different environment than if I have an employee come in and like, okay, come in and sit down, and I'm kind of posturing to just remind them that I'm in charge, I'm the one in control here. As a corollary to that, that's why we're using those statements of I imagine, or I would guess, or I think anybody in X position would probably go through X, Y, and Z. So I'm using those almost presumptive statements or just imagination statements like that. And the first thing, what we talked about earlier, is if I change my worldview, most of the time, the results that I'm looking for are a byproduct of me changing how I see the world. That's almost it. So the first thing I'm going to do is change your view of what's going on in your body right now. I'd say, Ken, I know you're nervous about this. You told me you were a little bit nervous about this meeting coming up. Explain to me the symptoms of nervousness. And then you would say, well, a little tight in my chest. I'm kind of thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, thinking about all the ways that it might go right, that I want it to go right. My heart beats a little fast. And I'd say, explain how any of those things are different than being excited. So we're kind of like just your worldview is shifting a little bit. And then once we have a little bit of understanding of like, my body is just ready for the meeting. That's all that's happening. I have to get you into the perfect mindset. And this is how I coach lawyers that are going to trial. This is people that are going into high stakes negotiations. If you can go into that room and outspeed everybody, you're like, you want to challenge yourself to move slower than everyone else in the room. That's your number one challenge. That's so I would hopefully prepare you at a lower stakes environment. Like, can you move slower than the waitress at TGI Fridays? Let's practice there first. But then our brains are wired to compare and contrast things. When we're children, we learn light is light because dark is there. We learn hot and cold. We learn opposites. The problem is with 90% of the people that I coach, especially high impact leaders, this is the biggest problem. They view the world through hierarchy and status. And that is the most destructive thing to persuasion or influence or gaining any kind of authority in a room. So I'm kind of rewiring their brain to start this comparison process of, can I be slower than them? That's all. And if you truly get to a place of not viewing the world as hierarchy and status, that means you also are going to treat that waitress at TGI Fridays exactly the same as you're treating these people across the table. We are in the business of manufacturing gut feelings in other people. And we're doing it whether we like it or not. We're doing it all day long. So what we really want to do is send the right signals in the right gut feelings. And the fastest way to do that is the hack to do that is, can I speak slower than the other person? Can I move slower than the other person to kind of slow down my physiology? So if I'm just giving you training before you're going in, I'm not going to teach you to look for 10 signals. That's too much. I'm going to overload your brain and it's too much cognitive stuff. So what we look in other people's eyes, do they blink less often when you talk? Is their blink rate slowing down? So when we say blink rate, this is how often we're blinking. The average blink rate is between 15 and 18 in a normal conversation. And when somebody is really focused on someone else, you're going to see their pupils dilate almost all the time, and you're going to see that blink rate start going down. They're going to blink less and less often. And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to have to count how often somebody's blinking. And you can, like if you want to be a super nerd about it, I did. I spent years thinking that I needed all this data and these numbers. So we're just watching that blink rate start to fall. That's all you're really looking for, a change. So like I start a conversation, are they blinking fast or slow? And then check in a few seconds later, is it speeding up, slowing down? And this is called blink rate. And blink rate is a measurement of how often we are blinking. And typically in normal conversation, the blink rate is between 12 and 15 blinks per minute. And if we experience stress, and this is universal across human beings, across cultures, and that's the great thing, because there's some things like gestures and things like that that are way different in some other culture. But this blink rate thing, it's unconscious. We're not aware of it going up or going down. And it's so reliable because of that. So high blink rate is a stress indicator. You're not just looking for a high or a low blink rate. You're looking for changes to that blink rate. That's the trick that will turn you into a profiler. When am I seeing a shift? When the blink rate is high, it's about an 80% per minute during high stress. Wow. And this is something you could see, like if you and I were sitting at the Atlanta airport right now, and with 100 people around us at a gate somewhere, I could show you someone's blink rate that's 50 feet away. And you don't have to count. And I promise nobody has to count. But you could look over there and be like, yeah, that looks faster than normal. And you would intuitively know that looks pretty fast. And then we kind of get to the slow blink rate. And that's what you want. If I'm in a leadership position, I'm in a job interview, it doesn't matter what situation. I want the blink rate to be as slow as possible, because slow blink rate is not relaxation, it's focus. So here's the procedure to use this. So step one, we start the conversation. Hey, Ken, I'm Chase. We shake hands and we start talking. And I'll get a little feel for, does the blink rate look pretty normal, pretty slow, or pretty fast? So if it's fast, I have one goal, to reestablish your focus and interest in what's going on, and I'll start seeing it slow down and blink less often and less often. And that's my goal. But if I'm in the middle of our conversation, let's say we're talking about contracts or sales figures, or you ask somebody about a credit score after you kind of go through this thing and they're doing an application, the moment that I'm talking about something and I see your blink rate go up, I will change the subject very quickly. So like if you're saying, well, tell me about this project, and I have this great story, but I see the blink rate go up, I know that the story is too long and you're losing interest rapidly. I know instantly I'm gonna wrap it up as fast as possible, or change the subject, or ask a question back to clarify something, to reestablish that person's focus. So I know as a speaker, the moment I see that blink rate start going up, I'll walk to the other side of the stage, I'll change the slide, I'll change the topic, I'll raise my voice, I'll jump down into the main area off the stage. I'll do something to reestablish focus so I can grab it and then lead it again. Because you can't lead someone's focus unless you know how to capture it. And the way that we measure captured focus is in low blink rates. So if you see blink rates slowing down and kind of staying pretty slow, you're doing a pretty good job.